am Kathy Patterson, and I am the Vice Moderator for Studies and Spiritual Growth. And this morning's opening devotions are going to introduce us to our study for this year, what our grandmothers taught us. And Chris Wolf put me onto a wonderful children's book called My Grandma Likes to Say. And Martha, you can put that slide up now. I would have liked to done the whole book, but I found that to be impossible with the equipment and the smarts that I have. It was written by Denise Brennan Nelson, who is from Howell, Michigan. This was written in 2007. And the illustrations were by Jane Monroe Donovan, who is in Pinckney, Michigan. To give you, since you can't see all the pictures, to give you an idea of what you're going to be listening to, I'm going to read to you the dedications in the book. And this one is from Denise, who wrote the book. She says to Grandma Carol, who is always there, rain or shine, and is never a stick in the mud. And in memory of Grandma Jerry, life is short, eat dessert first. And Jane wrote this to Riley, Levi, and Joel Price, who as models were as fine as frog's hair and as cute as the bugs in a rug. I had a whale of a good time working with you, meaning Denise. Good things come in small packages, which describes my grandma Alberta Downtree, who always had a heart of gold. Thank you for your love and support. So we begin, my grandma likes to say. Does your grandma ever say things you think are quite amusing? Do they make you scratch your head? Are her words a bit confusing? My grandma says some funny things. You're wet behind the ears. Don't let the cat out of the bag. And are those crocodile tears? It seems to me my grandma has a language all her own. The other day I heard her say she'd wait till the cows come home.
This has me a little worried. Is she coming apart at the seams? My grandma doesn't own a cow, but I won't spill the beans. When she tucks me in, she whispers, "You're as snug as a bug in a rug." And she gives me butterfly kisses and wraps me in a bear hug. You'd really like my grandma. They say she broke the mold. She's the salt of the earth, the real McCoy, and she has a heart of gold.
You're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, my grandma likes to say. I'm not sure what she means, but I like it anyway. My brother often picks on me. He likes to see me wail. I can't seem to make him stop until I lift my tail.
You're growing like a weed, my grandma likes to say. I'm not sure what she means, but I like it anyway. The weeds in Grandma's garden grow bigger every day. Most weeds are pesky problems, but weeds like me should stay.
Beware of a wolf in sheep's clothing, my grandma likes to say. I'm not sure what she means, but I like it anyway. If I were a wolf, I would not want a hot woolly suit to wear. No curly locks or hooves for me. I'd much rather run around bare.
That's a horse of a different color, my grandma likes to say. I'm not sure what she means, but I like it anyway. Polka dots and stripes, purple, orange, and blue, what color would a horse be if it were up to you?
When pigs fly, my grandma likes to say. I'm not sure what she means, but I like it anyway. His ears are pink and pointy. His nose seems rather big. Now I know the reason why. My pilot is a pig.
When the cat's away, the mice will play, my grandma likes to say. I'm not sure what she means, but I like it anyway. Baseball, soccer, video games, mice play them all. Nets and pucks and hockey sticks and hoops for basketball.
Like a bull in a china shop, my grandma likes to say. I'm not sure what she means, but I like it anyway. I sat with a bull in a china shop, sipping dainty cups of tea. He ordered a blueberry muffin and a cranberry scone for me.
I'm no spring chicken, my grandma likes to say. I'm not sure what she means, but I like it anyway. I know she's not a chicken. Grandma can't lay eggs. But wouldn't it be funny if she had springs for legs?
Knee-high to a grasshopper, my grandma likes to say. I'm not sure what she means, but I like it anyway. I bumped into a grasshopper. I only reached his knees. I asked him how he grew so tall. He said, I ate my peas.
Everything's coming up roses, my grandma likes to say. I'm not sure what she means, but I like it anyway. They started in the garden, but now they're everywhere. They're in my bath and in my bed and in my underwear.
Hit the hay, my grandma likes to say. I'm not sure what she means, but I like it anyway. My grandma gives me good advice. She tells me not to fight. Then why does grandma hit the hay every single night?
I really love my grandma and the things she likes to say. Carpe diem, c'est la vie, and where there's a will, there's a way. But of all the things my grandma says, my favorite has to be, rules are made to be broken when you come and stay with me.
As you can see, it's a delightful book. Hope you can get your hands on a copy so that you can see all the illustrations. That was kind of a fun way for us to begin this study on what our grandmothers taught us. So the next thing that we're going to do, and Martha, you can put up the second slide, is Chris and I are going to back and forth share some of the things that our grandmothers have taught us. And as you listen to it, begin to really think about your grandmothers and what they taught you. And you are encouraged to, as you go through this study, to start a list of your own to write down and keep it handy so that you can continue to add to your list. Here's what our grandmothers have taught us. How to take care of chickens.
Oh, my turn, sorry. I had two grandmas. I had a little old German grandma. She was very old. And she told me not to get old.
How to be a good but sloppy cook.
My other grandma was pretty modern. She was first grade teacher and we called her Gram. And she showed me how not to get old.
I would mention also that I was blessed to have both of my grandmothers, and they were kind of like Chris's. One was forward modern thinking and the other one was pretty old school. So the next one that I have is how important women's groups are in the church.
My little old German grandma, we lived right next door to her, attached by a circle drive. And all summer long, family would come to visit. I thought they were coming to see me. Of course, they were coming to see grandma. But grandma taught me that family is essential.
My old school grandmother taught me how long it takes for elderberry juice to wear off your hands.
I love it. My gram lived over the river and through the woods. It literally was that song. And we would go there every Sunday night. We would walk through the river and over the woods, no, over the river, through the woods to Graham's house. And I learned to be generous through her.
My grandmother, that was more modern, was a school teacher. And she taught me how important reading was.
My little German grandma didn't drive, so it was the tradition. My mother was a teacher, and so she was busy all week. Friday nights, we took grandma to town, to the doctor, and to get groceries. And my job was to push the cart for her and reach the stuff on the shelf she couldn't reach. And what that taught me was how to take care of others, and that grandma was very gracious in accepting that help.
My grandmother, and from now on, I will call her my Croatian grandmother. And she didn't drive either, and believe me, it was a good thing. But she also taught me that hard work is good for you.
Absolutely. My grandma, who was the teacher, had summers off. So every summer she went on some little trip someplace, often educational, sometimes fun, but she went to something called a Purdue. So I always wanted to know what that was.
Both of my grandmothers taught me that hugs are very, very important.
My little German grandma, who I'm pretty sure I was taller than she was by the time I was in 4th grade. She didn't want you to grow old because her body was wearing out. But what she taught me was that you keep going no matter what.
My Croatian grandmother finally taught me that beef tongue really does taste like roast beef.
Not quite, but anyway. My gram, the teacher, again, she taught me that learning is everything and that you keep learning no matter how old you were. She was in Bible study up until the time she couldn't read.
My teacher grandmother taught me that it was important to have a Bible and to read it.
Which then makes me think of my little German grandma. She had a very quiet faithfulness. She wasn't loud and boisterous, but again, the Bible was always there and it was used.
Both of my grandmothers taught me that to always keep your word.
My gram showed me that faith is ever and always. She was always searching and growing. I learned great lessons from both.
Martha, you may put up the next slide, please. So we do the opening prayer. It is the prayer that is at the beginning of each lesson in the Bible study. And if you wish, you may join in. Creating and loving God, as we read your word together, May we allow it to read us.
As we enter into your story, may we understand our own stories with more clarity and wisdom.
Help us to remember that you have always worked through the lives of ordinary women and men with all their faults and failing, people like us.
We bring our ordinary lives before you today. Transform our expectations so that as we study stories of the past, we may be open to your extraordinary future.
Amen.
Amen.
We have a land acknowledgement in accordance with the practice of the Presbyterian Church USA, adopted by the 223rd General Assembly, to open all meetings in this way. Because this is a Presbyterian Women in the Synod of the Covenant event, we acknowledge that our Synod of the Covenant is settled on the traditional lands of many Native tribes. These tribes include the Shawnee, Ojibwa, Wyandot, Kaskaskia, Kickapoo, Miami, Mingo, Odawa, Potawatomi, Way, Chippewa, Delaware, Eel River, Fox, Iroquois, Munsee, Ottawa, Sauk, Seneca, Meskwaki. Are there any members of these peoples with us on this Zoom gathering? We recognize that though the descendants of these people live among us, their voices are not present during this gathering because of a history of racism, removal, and genocide in which the church participated. We name this brokenness and acknowledge our need to repair. We recognize the unique and enduring relationship that exists between Indigenous people and their traditional territories. We acknowledge that we are on their historic homelands. Let this acknowledgement serve as a reminder of our ongoing efforts to recognize, honor, reconcile, and partner with the people on whose lands and water we benefit from today.
Thank you, Carol. Hello, everybody. My name is Pat McBride. I am your Synod of the Covenant Presbyterian Woman moderator. And my portion of the meeting today will be going over our business meeting real quickly so we can get on with listening to our different speakers. So I would first like you all to please let us start the business meeting. The first thing on our agenda is approval of the July 18th, 2020 business meeting at the Zoom gathering for the Presbyterian Women of the Synod. And you can find those on the pages 5 and 6 of your program guide. Are there any corrections from anybody to these minutes? Hearing none, let's go on. And since these came from the secretary, we can go on and approve these. Can I have a hand vote from everybody to approve the minutes that were in your program? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, please raise your hand. If you had your hand raised from before, please lower them. Thank you. And with that motion, it has passed. The next thing I would like to do is introduce to you our new leaders. I would like to present the following women for the slate for the leadership positions for the class of 2022 for the coordinating team for the Presbyterian Women of the Synod of the Covenant. When I call your name, please raise your name so everybody knows who you are. Kathy Patterson, she is returning for her second term for Vice Moderator of Studies and Spiritual Development. Next is Susan Ox. She's also returning for her second term as treasurer. Betty Kennedy is coming on as our Synod representative to the churchwide, which means she will be going to both the churchwide board of meetings, and she will also be coming back and reporting to our CT meetings. And Audra Carr is our new registrar. Sandra Vining has been on search committee, but she has agreed to be chair for this year. And we are still looking for 2 search committee members, one for Michigan and one for Ohio. So if you have any volunteers or would like to volunteer yourself, please let any one of us know. And for these positions, can I have any nominations from the floor? And I have to ask this 3 times. So number 2 is, can I have any nominations from the floor? And the 3rd time is, can I have any nominations from the floor? As of hearing no nominations, this motion goes to a vote. And since it came directly from the search committee, no motion is needed. So for all those that are in favor of these women becoming officers of our coordinating team, please raise your hand and a vote of yes. Thank you. And those that are opposed? Thank you. And so this vote is anonymously for these wonderful women who have accepted these positions to become installed later on in this program. Thank you very much. And at the same time, I would like to thank those officers that have served us for at least 3 years, some of them multiple sessions. Please raise your hand when I call your name so we can all know who you are. Joan Lockhart, who was our past registrar. Aaron Fox, the Synod representative to churchwide. Ann Walker, search committee chairperson. Chris Wolf, search committee chair member. And Josephine Laurie, who is also a search committee member. Thank you all for all the work that you've done for us. And next, I would like to introduce to you Susan Ox, who is our Synod treasurer for PW. And she's going to go over the current budget with you.
Thank you. Martha is going to share the screen with my reports. This first report is a proposed budget for January 1st, 2022 to December 31st, 2022. And in it, you can see the actual expenses for 2021 year to date. We have had contributions of $2,885.58. We're hoping that the contributions next year will increase when, once again, ladies are able to meet face-to-face in their circles and also to do fundraising. And the next one, next slide is expenses year to date and proposed for 2022. We have had $398.88 in expenses, and that was to renew our Zoom membership and also to archive the postage to archive some of our records. And we had an annual review of our budget. And expenses that we are anticipating for 2022 are $7,400. We are not sure whether there is going to be a USA mission experience or whether there's going to be global exchange in view of the pandemic. Are there any questions to this budget? It will be presented next week at the Synod Coordinating Council meeting. And the next slide, please, Martha. These are the current balances. We have two checking accounts, one that is just a general checking account that our budget comes out of, and the other is the gathering checking account where all expenses for our gatherings are taken out of. There's $39,000 in the general checking account and $17,000 in the gathering checking account. And we also participate in the PCUSA loan program. And right now, our balance in that is $13,207.32. And quoting from our annual review, overall, your organization's financial records are in good financial condition and the records are being well kept at this time. And that is my report, respectfully submitted. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. And next, I would like to introduce you all to our new interim Synod Executive for the Synod of the Covenant, Reverend Charles B. Hardwick, otherwise known as Chip.
Hi, everybody, and good morning. I am so glad that you invited me to come to your meeting today. Thank you especially to Pat, who keeps me updated on these things, and I appreciate that. While I was listening in the worship service about your the two women whose grandparents you were extolling, your grandmothers, I was thinking about my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, who lived in a small town in Kentucky until she was 91. She never had to make a single friend until she was 91, and she moved into a retirement center near Dayton, Ohio, where I grew up and where Dad lives. And she was so determined to make new friends that when she would meet somebody in the hallway or one of the meals, she would come back and she would write down what she learned about them in the directory of the retirement center. And so she taught me that it is never too late to make new friends. And so I'm thankful that at least I get to be your friends virtually one day. I hope that I will get to spend time with you in person as well. So thank you so much for having me. I'm going to share my screen and share a PowerPoint presentation with you. Pat or Kathy, when you see that, would you let me know? Do you see my slide? Great, thank you. Let's see, I'm on my computer, which is, I'm usually got a mouse. There we go. I don't know how to move it forward. Now, you all are the kind of super Presbyterians who come to Saturday morning meetings on Zoom. So you probably already know what the Synod of the Covenant is, but just in case, I want to show you that our Synod is most of Ohio and all of Michigan, and then a little bit of Indiana, a little bit of Wisconsin, and a little bit of Kentucky. And so thank you. We have 11 presbyteries in our Synod. It's about 100,000 Presbyterians and about 700 churches. So, and in those churches, you all are among the most important and the biggest leaders. So thank you, each one of you. You know, Presbyterian Women, the organization, and women who are Presbyterian are among the most important people in our churches and in our presbyteries and in our Synod. So thank you very much for all the ways you serve Christ in your congregations and your presbyteries and here in the Synod. Just a little bit of an update on the Synod itself. You might remember that at the General Assembly in St. Louis in 2018, there was an overture that asked the General Assembly to look into disorder in the Synod of the Covenant, and they voted to do that. And then they formed an administrative commission to look after the Synod. And then that administrative commission took original jurisdiction on Valentine's Day of 2020. And when people look at me strange when I say that they took original jurisdiction, I like to compare it to Britney Spears and her custodianship. So if you never thought that the Synod of the Covenant would be compared to Britney Spears, you are wrong, because we are in a similar state where there is a custodianship over us, where the administrative commission is the one who makes all the decisions, who is really the ones that are in charge of us now. Now, in a different situation from Britney Spears, I'm actually very thankful for them. They are so helpful and so wise and so encouraging, and they've been really great. In fact, I had a meeting with all of the executive presbyters recently, and they said, I think this is the most helpful AC in the history of ACs in the Presbyterian Church USA, and they really have been so great. We're working towards we're having jurisdiction returned to us probably next month at our meeting. And we've been working towards a kind of focus for our ministries that our assembly will have a chance to look at and improve and tweak. But right now we're talking about how in our synod, we'll try anything to equip leaders who tend to God's emerging creative future. And so I want to tell you about just a few of the things that we're doing towards that. The first one is that we've been offering higher education scholarships for Christian leaders. We gave out about $40,000. It was 10 of the 11 presbyteries had winners, 29 churches were represented, and about half of the students were Black or Indigenous or people of color. And we were so glad about that. I had a video to show you of a young woman who has 2 children, and she's a student at a associate's degree program for becoming a medical tech. And I wanted to show that to you so you could hear her generosity or her gratitude for the Synod's generosity to her. But you'll have to go online to hear that. I am grateful for your churches. You know, your per capita is what lets us do a lot of the ministry that we do. So thank you very much. And that's what contributes to a lot of the scholarships that we give. I wanted to tell you next about Matthew 25 grants that are available to churches or Presbyterian churches or Presbyterian ministries, like, for instance, the Presbyterian women in your various presbyteries. These Matthew 25 grants, you don't have to be an official Matthew 25 congregation or organization, as long as you're working towards congregational vitality or against structural racism or systemic poverty. And these grants are for up to $5,000. And so PW groups would be eligible for these grants. And so you could do that as a synod or as a presbytery or as a church's PW group. And these are due by September 30th. So the timing is getting short, but I hope you'll apply for those. Again, they're up to $5,000 and you can find them on our website. Another thing we're doing to equip leaders in our synod is by doing a lot of leadership development work, and I'd invite you to take part in those. If you're on the committee on ministry or committee on preparation for ministry in your presbytery, there's a training for you coming up. And then if you have people in your lives, your staff or your personnel committee or your youth directors who would be helped by taking a boundaries training. We're offering boundaries training at the end of the year too. These are through a group called LeaderWise, and they've been very successful and appreciated. So I hope that some of you can take part in them. And then the last thing we've been doing is offering a lot of preaching workshops. Every month there's a workshop for preachers, and they've been taught by various homiletical scholars from throughout the country, and they've really been quite popular also. So I don't think any of you, well, I don't know. I shouldn't say I don't know how many of you might be ministers of word and sacrament or preaching lay preachers. So if you are, the workshops are at 10 a.m. on Wednesdays, the first Wednesday of each month, and they're all by Zoom. And again, your per capita helps to pay for those. I want to, since you can't see what our website is, let me just tell you what it is. It's Synod, SYNOD, of the covenant.org. And if you go there, you'll be able to get our newsletter. That's the best way to stay in touch with us, is through our newsletter. We send it out about once a month. You won't get bombarded, but it'll help you learn about things like the grants program earlier than if you're just hearing about it now. And for students in your churches, you could hear about the scholarship programs and things like that. You can also find and follow us on Facebook or on YouTube, and you can see the videos of things like these workshops we're having, as well as the scholarship winners. I want to give you my email. It's chip@synodofthecovenant.org. And I would be glad to hear from you if there's any way I can support you. No one else sees that email. And so I would be glad to hear from you if I can help you in any way. And then finally, I know that I'm not the one introducing Sherry Harper, who is the next speaker, but I'm going to tell you that Sherry and I got to work together when I was in Louisville. I worked as the director of theology, formation, and education, and Sherry was slumming as my assistant. She's much more gifted, but she was the most amazing administrative assistant ever. And my favorite story I tell people this all the time, Sherry, but there was a presentation I needed to make to the heads of the board of the Association of Presbyterian Colleges and Universities. And my time was really short, and some of those presidents, remarkably, were not Presbyterian themselves. And so I got invited to come and make a presentation about what it means to be Presbyterian. And time was short for me. And Sherry said, "You want me to just do this presentation for you? I'll just prepare it for you and you can go give it." So that's what we did. She prepared it. I went and gave it. And the president said afterwards, they said, "This was the best presentation on Presbyterianism I have ever heard." And several of them said, "Do you mind? Can we have a copy of this so we can use it for our board meetings?" And I said, "Yes, but only if you tell them that Sherry Harper is the one who did all of this, because I had almost nothing to do with it except for standing up here and giving it." So I miss Sherry a lot. I really admire her and respect her so much. And I know she's got a special treat for you. I also suspect that someone's going to give her an actual introduction, but I had to get that out because I'm so delighted to share a meeting with her. I also wanted to let you know that I have a Presbytery of Lake Michigan meeting right now also. So I'm going to listen to Sherry's presentation and then I'm going to join that meeting. So I'll leave you then. But thank you so much for inviting me to present. Sorry for the technical difficulties, and God bless you and your ministries. That concludes my report.
Thank you so much, Chip. We always love hearing from you. And with that, it's the conclusion of the business portion of this meeting. And I need a motion to close the business meeting. Can I have somebody give a motion, please? Unmute yourself to do it.
So moved.
Thank you, Sandy. Does anybody second?
Support.
Thank you. And all those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. And those opposed? Motion's carried, and we will proceed with our gathering. Thank you all.
Good morning. I'm Martha Poole, moderator of PWA in the Presbytery of Scioto Valley. And it's my honor and pleasure to introduce the Reverend Sherry Harper, who will introduce this year's Bible study. Sherry works for PWA in Louisville as the mission associate. What that means is she has her hands in all kinds of PW mission work, like the thank and birthday offerings, the global exchange, the U.S. mission experience, and Together in Service. So make note of her name, and when you have questions about mission, Sherry is the one to talk to. She is a native of Texas, but has been in Louisville for quite some time. Welcome, Sherry, to our gathering. We are eager to hear about this year's Bible study.
Thank you, Martha. And thank you, Chip, for that introduction. I appreciate that. Yes, so I am one of your staff members working in Louisville. This is actually my second time to work for Presbyterian Women. My very first call out of seminary was to Presbyterian Women, and I was actually ordained as with Presbyterian Women being the call that I had to be ordained with. So PW always remains very close to my heart. And after I finished up working with Chip and then in his office, then I was fortunate to get the call to come back to PW, and I'm so glad to be here in this. I'm starting my 4th year back with PW. As Martha said, my primary role with Presbyterian Women is to work with mission. I heard in one of the reports a question about whether or not we will have the USAME this year or this triennium, or we'll have a global exchange. And that is definitely something that the mission committee from the board is going to be talking about actually on Monday and voting on Monday. I think that chances are we won't do a global exchange because it would be so hard to plan with COVID. but we'll just have to see what that committee decides and how they vote on it. And I'll just hold up the thank offering brochure. I know that y'all are doing a lot with the thank offering today. And again, that's part of my work. And so if you ever have questions about the thank offering or the birthday offering or those materials, I'm always super glad to help you out with that. So the Bible study for this year, y'all are already very familiar with. I'm trying not to do a ton of PowerPoint, so I'm doing a little less low tech version. So here's the Bible study that you're all very familiar with, what my grandmother's taught me. The author is Meryl Blair, and she is a theology professor in Australia. Hopefully you all saw her during the recorded version of the plenary session for the gathering. She did a really lovely about 12-minute talk during that time. And that's still up on the YouTube channel. So you can always access her little intro and you can show it at your circle meetings or however you want to use that, because I think it's really an excellent intro. And then many of you probably know Magdalena Garcia. She wrote the suggestions for leaders, and she did a really nice job with that. So I think that one of the things we'll be doing all year long is kind of thinking about our own grandmothers. Actually, the thank offering worship service also has a little tie-in with grandmothers for this year. So I'll just mention my two grandmothers, Treon Finley, who was a Baptist, and Clara Lynn, who was a Presbyterian and a great Presbyterian woman. And she's the one who introduced me to hands-on mission at First Presbyterian Church in Dallas, Texas. And I don't know that I would be here today without the influence of my grandmother, Clara. So I give thanks for her every day. Now, in this Bible study, what we're doing is we're looking at the genealogy of Jesus, and Matthew refers to Jesus as the Messiah or Jesus the Christ. And that opening genealogy mentions some women. And for many people, that is very intriguing that we have these 5 women who are listed in this genealogy. Because of course, if you've done much study of the Bible, you know that oftentimes the women don't get mentioned very much, and they certainly don't get mentioned by name very much. So the fact that we have these women, and most of them are named, is really something to pay attention to. So this study is one that helps us to think about the stories of those women, to think about the challenges that they faced and the choices that they faced. It gives us a chance to think about how they contributed to this genealogy that led to Jesus the Christ. And not just, of the fact that they were named, but that their story is an important part of who Jesus is and who we are as followers of Jesus. And then Meryl, the author, she also kind of invites us to think about what we can learn from their example of how they lived, and how we can be inspired to follow them and have our own witness to Christ and our own action despite the challenging circumstances that we all face. So I think it's going to be a Bible study that everybody will really enjoy and get into, and I'm pretty excited about it myself. So I did want to let you know that what I'm working from is a workshop for leaders. Many of you have probably been to Bible study workshops in the past, and you might not know that there's always a workshop for leaders that's available online. So if you can't find that on the PW website, you can always send me a little email, and I'm glad to help you find that, or just send it to you myself. So I thought it would be fun to open with one of the activities that's listed in that workshop. So if you are on Zoom where you're just looking at the speaker, you should change your view so that you can see as many people as possible. So I'll give you a second to change your view so you can see the gallery of folks. All right. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you to raise your hand if any of these things apply to you. So the first one is an easy one. Raise your hand if your last name is your partner's or your spouse's name. Yep, most of us. Raise your hand if your last name is actually your father's family name. Oh, got a couple. Raise your hand if your last name is your mother's family name. Raise your hand if your last name is a blend of names or maybe a new version of your family name. Don't see many on that one. I think if we had some younger folks, we might have more hands up for that one because that's definitely something that's happening more today. Raise your hand if you have traced your family back more than 3 generations. So your parents, your grandparents, on your great-grandparents. Raise your hand if you've done that. Oh, wow, quite a few. Raise your hand if you have an extended genealogy for either parent, you know, kind of like the PBS show that shows a big family tree. Okay, quite a few of you. Raise your hand if you've visited a genealogy website. Yeah, I've done that. I had to do that for seminary. Raise your hand if you would just like to know more about your family stories, but you don't know them. Raise your hand if, and you don't have to tell it now, but raise your hand if you know of a story that one of your ancestors had to face a very challenging time. And raise your hand, this is the last one, raise your hand if you could tell a story about a woman in your family, either current or going back further, who taught you something by the way she lived. I think we can all answer that. So I think that's just a fun way to get our minds around what this Bible study is doing. So this Bible study is getting us to think about genealogies, obviously the genealogy of Jesus, but also hopefully the genealogy of our own family lines, and to think about those stories and to connect with those stories and to also connect with what those stories can tell us today and how they can inspire us. And I would just add, help us to think about teaching those stories to our daughters or our granddaughters or our nieces or our friends. I think it's so important for us to make sure that we tell those stories so that my daughter is named Clara, so that my daughter knows why she is the 4th Clara in that line. That's just a little personal aside there. All righty. I'm gonna share my screen. So what you see here is the actual text, the Matthew 1 through 16, where we see that genealogy of Jesus. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but I did want to just have you look at it. This is not the NRSV. This is actually the Common English Bible version. It's a little bit easier to read because it's not in one big block. It's separated out so you can see the names. So as you're looking at this, just glance at those names, and you can unmute yourself and kind of pop in if you want to say something. So as you look at those names, would you guess that these are all male names, especially as you look at kind of the first names on those lines? Do they look like all male names? A lot of these names I know are unfamiliar. Zerubbabel, I'm not sure that many of us know that name, or Eliezer. Of course, that you might recognize that name from a hymn. Hezron. A lot of these are names that we don't necessarily know, but it is interesting to look at those and see that primarily they're male names. So when you look at this, what female names do you see? And y'all can just call them out.
Bruce,
Tamar.
Rahab,
Yep. We've got two more. There's one on this page. In verse 6, we've got David was the father of Solomon, whose mother had been the wife of Uriah. Does anybody know who the wife of Uriah is?
Bathsheba.
Yes, Bathsheba. So that'll be something to think about. Why was Bathsheba not named here? And then our very last one, who is number 5 that you see on here?
Mary.
Mary. Way down at the bottom we get to Mary. So of these 4 women, they're often called mother, but one was identified as wife, and we have named her as Bathsheba. Can anybody think of a reason why maybe Bathsheba was not named here? She was just called the wife of Uriah.
I'm thinking it might be because of how she became, or how David took her and had Uriah killed. So it might be giving some glory to Uriah.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great answer. Any others? Well, after you read that particular section, you might have some more ideas. You know, Bathsheba is certainly an interesting woman in our lineage here, and so that'll be fun to learn more about her and maybe have some more ideas down the road, maybe why she wasn't mentioned. And then, of course, down there in verse 16, we've got Jacob was the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom Jesus was born. So many of the women that we had seen up in the earlier verses, they were called mother, but notice that Mary here is not referred to as mother. So think about that Mary is referred to kind of passively as the husband, Jacob is the husband of Mary, and yet Mary isn't named as a mother, as you'll see up in verse 5, whose mother was Rahab and whose mother was Ruth, and yet Mary doesn't get that same treatment. So that's just something to kind of be aware of and think about, again, when you get to those lessons, just to think about what was going on there. So I think that will be some food for thought for you all. All right. Now, the next thing I wanted to show you can y'all see that?
Yes.
Okay. So the art in this study is from Cody Miller. And I think that the art is really fascinating. You can go to his website and see more of his art. You can even buy his art on the website. This particular picture, I believe, is from, it is actually from the introduction. So what Cody has said is that obviously he does a lot of mixed media, and he mixes a lot of old and new, and he mixes a lot of usual and, kind of what we might consider normal with very unusual and very different modes of art. he also kind of takes, he adds these things together so that we get a mix of the known and a mix of the unknown in his works. And he says he also, what he tends to do is he uses little bits and pieces from his home and incorporates them into his art, and so that his art can kind of find a new home. So I hope that you all will really pay attention to the art for each lesson. And, and when you look at it, spend some time really studying it and thinking about what is known and what is unknown in the picture. And then you can also use that with the story. What is known and what is unknown in the story? Just in what we've talked about in the last few minutes. It's unknown why Bathsheba is not named. It's unknown why Mary is not referred to as mother. So this study and this art will give us a lot to think about and a lot to discuss within your circles. And I hope that'll be a really rich discussion for everybody. So I don't want to take up too much more time. I will just mention a few things about the study that are going to be important as you are teaching and learning from it. You'll want to make sure that on pages 6 and 7, you really use that scope and sequence. The Presbyterian Women Bible Studies frequently have not had such a thing, but if you are used to teaching normal Sunday school curriculum, oftentimes you'll have a scope and sequence at the beginning. And this is just a really helpful way to just go to pages 6 and 7, and you'll see what each lesson is about. And you'll be able to get very quickly a view of what the scripture is and a view of what the main idea is. So especially if you're wanting to, put something in your newsletter about what the next lesson is about, or just be able to send something out, or just review really quickly. If maybe you read the lesson weeks ago, but now you need to go back and teach it, use that scope and sequence, because that's really a gift to have that there. And then in terms of how the lessons go, the lessons are going to be familiar if you've done the PW Bible studies before. So you're going to have just a little scripture snippet at the beginning. And then your main idea, again, it's going to be really short so that you can just get an idea briefly of what you're going to be reading about. As we've mentioned, the opening prayer is one that's the same for each lesson. And I think that'll actually be really nice so that people will have something familiar to hang on to every month as you're doing your lesson. And then, of course, you've got your story, and this time the questions are embedded within the story. It's not something that you have to flip to another page to kind of figure out what the discussion questions are. They are embedded right in there. And then at the end of each lesson, you've got a couple of pages of suggestions for leaders that were written by Magdalena. Magdalena's done a really nice job of, in each of those suggestions, kind of pointing out that sometimes these stories that we tell of our ancestors or of our mothers and grandmothers, they can be kind of painful, or when we're talking about some of the domestic violence in some of these stories and things like that, those can be kind of triggering for people, especially if they've had those instances in their own lives or their own families. So do pay attention to that as you're preparing, that you can set an example of, it's okay to be hurt. It's okay if maybe you need to leave the circle for a minute. It's okay. So set a nice pastoral and compassionate circle so that if somebody does get triggered or hurt by something, you're ready to make space for that and make a loving circle for that. And then I would also just give you the heads up that a lot of the suggestions are not something that well, I'll just say I frequently am bad about either teaching Sunday school or teaching a Bible study lesson, and I don't really look at it until the night before. I am terrible about that. Some of these lessons are not ones that you can look at the night before. So some of them you're going to need to, like, if you choose to do the play that is laid out for the story of Ruth and Naomi. You might want to gather some fun props to use, hats and scarves and stuff to show who Ruth is and who Beth, and things like that. There are some suggestions where it says, invite somebody if they have had the experience of being a refugee, or somebody in their family has been an immigrant. Again, this is kind of going back to the Ruth and Naomi story, to invite that person, but obviously that is not something you can do the night before. So don't be like me and read ahead and plan when you're getting ready for those lessons. The final thing that I will just mention is that there are always a lot of resources to go with the Bible studies. So online, there is the bulletin cover that you can download, and you can print off those bulletin covers. In Horizons magazine, you're always going to get a nice, what we call Bible study resource. And so lessons 1 and 2 are already available, even though the magazine isn't out yet. And if you need those downloads, you can just let me know and I can give you those. On the PW website, there's always blogs that are put up for each lesson. And this time the blog is actually being written by Meryl. And as I mentioned, we also have that on YouTube, the video of Meryl speaking at the gathering. So I hope that this will be a really worthwhile and interesting Bible study this year for everyone. I hope that everyone will take the opportunity to tell the stories of your own grandmothers and enjoy spending some time doing that as we think about the women in Jesus' genealogy who are also our grandmothers in the faith. So thank you all for having me, and that's it unless you have questions.
I'm Carol Hilkema. I'm the gathering coordinator for Synod PW, and I'm from Detroit PW. At this time, I'm honored to be able to introduce my friend, the Reverend Kathy Reeves, who is our new moderator of Presbyterian Women. And I'm very glad to have been able to get to know Kathy over the last several years since her retirement from working for PW, actually in the job that Sherry Harper now holds. We like to vacation in the Manistee area where Kathy now lives. You can read more about Kathy in the program book, and you'll learn more about Kathy as she speaks. However, I will share that she's very thoughtful, loves to play cards, watch sunsets over Lake Michigan, is Presbyterian through and through, and while she lives in Michigan, is a minister member of the Presbytery of Denver. We welcome the Reverend Kathy Reeves, moderator of Presbyterian Women, to share with us this morning.
Thank you, Carol, for that generous introduction. I'm really happy to be living within the bounds of the Synod of the Covenant, and actually have some history, because when I went to high school, I graduated high school from Whetstone High School in Columbus, and then I went to Otterbein College in Westerville. And so I used to go to Synod schools. I was a member of Broad Street Presbyterian Church. And so it's good to be back. I'm really loving living in Michigan, believe it or not. The winters haven't been bad at all. And so it's great to be with you. Thank you so much for this invitation and for honoring me with calling me to serve as the moderator of Presbyterian Women for the next 3 years. So your invitation for me to reflect on what my grandmothers taught me in keeping with the theme of this year's Bible study has been a real gift. I think about my grandmothers, but I've never really thought about them with regard to what they taught me. And so thank you very much for this opportunity to reflect. It's been a good personal exercise, and so I'm happy to share with you what I know about my grandmothers. I had 3 grandmothers. I never knew my grandmother Alta. I'm named after her. She died from pneumonia when she was young. And I don't know, I've got a picture here. I don't know if you can see it or not. That's Alta. I would have liked to have known her. It sounds like she was a remarkably strong woman. When my grandfather died at a very young age, she was left widowed with 3 very young children under the age of 5. I have heard that together with my grandfather, they were involved with the civil rights movement in Omaha, Nebraska during the 1920s. I have heard that Alta was a very kind and generous woman, sharing what she had with others in need, even though she didn't have much herself. So that her children would have a better life, she moved the family from Omaha to San Diego, where they would have the support from other members of the extended family. She must have been very brave. When she died, her twin boys were 14 and her daughter was 17. So her sister Dorothy and husband Dan took the kids home to live with them. Here they are. That's Dorothy. We call Dorothy grandmother. Dorothy and Dan married when they were in their late 30s and never had children. So for them to take Alta's kids to live with them was a very generous thing to do. I can't imagine the adjustments that everyone in that household had to make to accommodate each other. Dorothy was a teacher, and she taught school in Hawaii for several years. She traveled to Hawaii by herself. She didn't have the supportive family. And so that was a very brave thing to do. My earliest memories of Dorothy were when my grandparents lived in San Francisco. When our family was home on furlough every 3 years, my parents served in Cameroon as mission personnel, and we would go over for 3 years at a time, and then we would come back to the US for a 9-month furlough, and we would go and live in Berkeley at some missionary homes that were there. Grandmother and grandfather were living in San Francisco, and we would drive across the Bay Bridge to visit grandmother and grandfather. She was always very well dressed and very elegant. I don't think I ever saw her wearing pants. We grandchildren were always expected to be on our best behavior. Children were to be seen and not heard when we visited them. But I remembered that she prepared the best roast beef and leg of lamb dinners. Jessie was my grandmother on my mother's side of the family. She grew up in a devout Presbyterian Church of Scotland family in New Jersey. She met my grandfather when he was a student at Princeton Seminary. Before he proposed to her, he asked if she would be willing to live in Africa. And she said yes. So they married and set sail for Cameroon in 1926. They must have been newlyweds. I think about what a great leap of faith for her to leave her family and comfortable life to join my grandfather in fulfilling, as he put it, longing for adventure by serving as a missionary in Africa. When Jessie arrived in Cameroon, there was no electricity or running water where they lived. Outhouses were still widely used by mission personnel serving in isolated places. The house they lived in was made of bark walls, plank floors, and thatched roof, built upon stilts to prevent infestation. There were not a lot of roads, and the roads that were there were dirt roads, more like paths. A lot of travel was done on foot or on a motorcycle with a sidecar. Eventually, they did buy a car from one of the other mission families there. Canoes were used to cross the rivers. My mother was born in Cameroon. Grandma must have relied heavily on the other missionary women there for support as a new mother. When my mother was a young child, Grandpa was an itinerating pastor, trekking into the bush for days at a time. I can imagine there were times when she felt very much alone, even though there was at least one other missionary woman at the same place. Jessie is probably the grandmother that I knew the best. When I was growing up and my parents were serving in Cameroon, my grandparents were still living there. I remember Jessie as being very strict, but I have heard that as young women arrived in Cameroon to begin their years of service, they found her to be very helpful and kind as she helped them adjust to the life there. She offered generous hospitality to many visitors. There were no hotels, so when visitors came from the United States or from other towns in Cameroon, she would host them in her home. She was involved with Presbyterian women, both here at home and abroad. I remember her talking about going to Presbyterial meetings. We were from the United Presbyterian Church. I regret that I did not have a closer relationship with my grandmothers. My grandmothers were not the kind who spoiled us. The grandmothers I knew were strict and critical, but they were also very strong women, and they showed great courage at times in their lives. I think I probably would have been closest to Alta had she lived. I have been told that I share a lot of her traits. It makes me sad that Alta would never know that both of her twin sons would serve as mission personnel in Cameroon, and that her daughter would marry an Egyptian and move to Egypt, where she has spent most of her life. Alta would never know that she would have 10 grandchildren and 16 great-grandchildren. I would have liked to have heard her stories and learned from her. Dorothy and Jessie lived long enough to meet all their grandchildren and some of their great-grandchildren. So what did I learn from my grandmothers, I ask? And I think my answer is my grandmothers taught me to be curious about the world, to embrace adventure, to have courage, to be generous, to be hospitable, to accept people as they are, to seek equity and justice for everyone, to show compassion, and to live in faith. Thank you. Let us pray. Eternal God, source and giver of every perfect gift, we praise you for the lives and ministries of women of faith, waymakers and trailblazers, leaders and mentors among us today and in your divine presence, named and unnamed throughout history. We honor their life stories and praise you for their wisdom and witness, for their courage and strength, for their endurance and resilience. As we seek to serve through the ministry of Presbyterian women, as we seek to love you by loving our neighbor, help us to overcome exhaustion and feelings of defeat. Give us courage and strength to do what is right. Empower us with endurance and resilience to run the race before us. Grant us wisdom in all decisions, that we may witness to your love and grace. Help us to keep our eyes on Jesus, perfecter of our faith, example of life, redeemer of us all. In Jesus we pray. Amen. We affirm our call by reciting the Presbyterian Women Purpose.
Forgiven and freed by God and Jesus Christ and empowered by the Holy Spirit, we commit ourselves
to nurture our faith through prayer and Bible study,
to support the mission of the church worldwide,
to work for justice and peace, and
to build an inclusive, caring community of women that strengthens the Presbyterian Church USA and witnesses to the promise of God's kingdom.
Gracious God, we are grateful for the gifts you bestow upon us for service. We thank you for the women you call to the ministry of Presbyterian women, which we carry out in manifold ways. Thank you for the time given, resources shared, and lives touched. Knowing that all gifts come from you, we especially thank you for the women who commit to serving in positions of leadership. Grant them wisdom and vision as they carry out their ministry. Amen. Having affirmed the purpose of Presbyterian women, will you commit to bringing its words into practice, leading Presbyterian women in nurturing faith, supporting mission, working for justice and peace, and building an inclusive, caring community?
we will.
We will.
Will you be a prayerful leader, seeking the wisdom of the Holy Spirit to lead with joy and love? And in your role, will you commit to model self-care, healthy time management, and spiritual nourishment?
We will.
Will you listen to your individual Presbyterian women with an open heart, honoring their life stories and experiences? And will you be receptive to both words of encouragement and words of concern, seeking to demonstrate compassion and grace in times of disagreement?
We will.
And to the congregation, the women gathered to support these newly elected leaders, will you, Presbyterian women and members of the faith community, support and pray for these leaders? And will you, with God's help, partner with them in ministry?
We will.
we will.
Well, now I have the honor of declaring that Kathy Patterson has been installed as Vice Moderator of Studies in Spiritual Development, that Susan Oakes has been installed as Treasurer, that Betty Kennedy has been installed to represent the Synod of the Covenant on the PW Board of Directors, that Audra Carr has been installed as Registrar, and that Sandra Vining has been installed as the Search Committee Chair. I now declare that you are installed as an elected leader of Presbyterian women for this synod. Everything you do in word and in deed, let it be for the glory of God and as a witness to Christ's light in you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you to all of you new people that are coming onto the board, remaining on the board, or returning to our board. We are so grateful for all your time and service, and I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you.
And now we are going to have our two thank offering demonstrations. I'm going to start. Martha's going to put the slides up on the screen. My name is Susan Oakes, and my church was one of the recipients of the International Thank Offering Grant for 2021. I entitled this presentation, Two Pastors, a Field, a Vision, a Mission. Reverend Dr. Troy Hauser Bryden was the mission pastor of Kirk of the Hills Church in Birmingham, Michigan. Pastor Troy contacted Wayfinders Missions, who paired the church up with Pastor Ed Perez of Koinonia Ministries in Orange Walk, Belize. This photo is in the field where the first youth group from the Kirk in 2014 began work on the Koinonia Worship Center in Orange Walk, Belize. In March of 2017, Pastor Troy accepted a call to First Presbyterian Church of Grand Haven. He brought with him his passion to support Koinonia missions. Where is Belize? It is a small country in Central America. It borders on Mexico and Guatemala. Orange Walk is 47 kilometers north of Belize City. In 2018, adult members of the congregation of First Presbyterian Church of Grand Haven traveled to Belize to lay the foundation for a Sunday school daycare building. In Belize, education is not free. Elementary school is mandatory, so a child must go to school regardless of financial situation. And what about daycare for working families? A single parent that works earns between $75 to $90 per week. The cost of daycare is about $35 a week. That leaves $40 to $55 a week for a family to live on. For every 100 children that attend elementary school, only 25 to 30 can afford to attend high school. When a young person is ready to attend high school, the real struggle begins. High school tuition is $500 to $800 per year, plus books, uniforms, and other school essentials. The free daycare that would be provided by Koinonia Ministries would enable the family to save for their children's education. This is the foundation that was laid by the first group of mission workers from First Presbyterian Church of Grand Haven. Our youth group was scheduled to return in 2020, but like everything else during the pandemic, that visit was canceled. This is the current kitchen area for the Sunday School Daycare Center. The thank offering grant that was submitted requested to make additional improvements. The grant was approved in the amount of $15,600. Yes, this is a wood-burning stove made out of cinder blocks to cook the children's meals. The funding will build a new kitchen, dig a well, and a septic system. This is the eating area. The current floor is dirt and will be replaced by a concrete one. This flooded area will also be filled in. This is what the worship center of Koinonia Ministries looked like in 2011. And now we're going to have a video walking tour by Pastor Ed. I'm sorry, it doesn't appear that the audio is on this one either, but you can get an idea of what it looked like. This is what the worship center of Koinonia Ministries looks like in present day. This is the daycare building that was constructed on the foundation that the Presbyterian Church of Grand Haven laid. And this is the worship center that was built by the members of the congregation of Kirk of the Hills in Birmingham. And those are curtains on the windows. It's fairly open area. And this is the well that has been completed for the kitchen. And behind it is the kitchen cinder block building that took the place of the other open building with the steel corrugated sides. These are the two pastors who saw a field, had a vision, and implemented a mission of outreach to the people and children of Orange Walk, Belize. Pastor Ed reports that 95 children were able to attend Vacation Bible School. And that's my pastor on the right. Many thanks to Reverend Dr. Troy Hauser-Bryden and Pastor Ed Perez for their vision and passion for this mission. Thank you to all the Presbyterian women who have contributed to the PW Thank Offering. Thank you to the congregations of Kirk of the Hills Presbyterian Church in Birmingham, Michigan, and First Presbyterian Church of Grand Haven. Thank you to Melissa Verhaeg, co-author of the Thank Grant from First Presbyterian Church of Grand Haven, and heartfelt thanks to Martha Poole for all her assistance in the preparation of this presentation. Thank you, ladies.
I think I'm the one that's next. I'm Pat Torbeck. and I am a member of the board of an organization called The Castle that's in Centerville, Ohio, and serves the Miami Valley, particularly serving those people who are severely mentally ill. But this is a story of a group of people who had a problem, had an issue, and decided to sit down together and figure out how to solve it. Back in 1993, there was a group of people who all had family members who had severe and persistent mental illness diagnoses. And they all shared the problem of trying to find ways for these family members to live productive lives. These family members were at a point in time where they really could not be gainfully employed. It was not a time when they could be in school. They needed something to do besides sitting at home, staring at the wall, watching TV, smoking cigarettes, and drinking coffee. They began to talk to each other, and they began to look around, and they discovered something called a clubhouse model. And they decided they needed their own clubhouse. They needed a place where their family members could go every day, do things that were interesting and productive, and be in a safe environment where the family members did not have to be with them every day. One of the people in this group owned a house, a very large house in the middle of Centerville, and said, well, we can use that house. They recruited a director of nursing who had just retired from the state hospital, and they put together a program in this house that provided things for people to do. Out of this has grown a not-for-profit organization that now serves over 300 people, all of whom are persistently, severely mentally ill, but all of whom are able to participate in this organization. It operates, frankly, on a shoestring. They're now buying the house from the estate of the people that owned it. They have a social worker as director. They have a peer support employee who is actually someone who is mentally ill herself and has managed to control her symptoms and learned how to work the system. And she goes with other people who are members of the castle when they go deal with Social Security or go to their doctor. She's able to, for instance, help explain what someone is feeling, explain their symptoms in a way that helps the doctor work with them. She's been able to accomplish changes in medication. I think one of the big stories I love is that she was able to help someone get medication changes in a way that has now made them able to be gainfully employed. The organization, as I said, operates on a shoestring. Their budget is about $260,000 a year. They get half of that from the Adamus board for the kinds of services that they provide that are reimbursable under Medicare, Medicaid, and the state of Ohio mental health services. The rest of it has to come from donations. They get about $30,000 a year from the people they consider major donors, and the rest of it is all coming from those of us who are just able to give a little bit. They have a couple of fundraisers a year. They get a lot of donations from family members. The Westminster Presbyterian Church in Dayton, Ohio, has provided funding every year in small amounts. And it was a major boost when they were able to receive the thank offering in 2017. That made a big difference for them. They have 2 vans. So you can go pick members up. We have some members who have their own cars. We have some members who use the public transportation. But for many of them, it is important to have those 2 vans who are able to come and pick them up every day. During COVID, they have not been able to serve as many people at a time because of the need for social distancing. So they've had to limit the number of people that can drop in on any given day. But at the same time, they've been able to continue their activities. They have a number of volunteers who work with them, nursing students who will come and provide nursing clinics and talks on health and issues. They have art therapists who come in. A number of the local churches come in and help provide activities, including helping with lunch. They provide lunch every day. So as I said, this really to me is one of the best stories I have ever heard of a group of people who had a problem that they needed to solve and decided to figure out how to solve it themselves. But remember, they started this in 1993, and many of those people are now gone. So at this point, we have a 10-member board of directors, and they're dependent totally on donations and volunteers. So I remind people all the time that, well, they started solving the problem themselves. Now that they're gone, and that need still exists, and those 300 members still need support, it's time for the rest of us to step up and see how we can continue this kind of a project. So I'm open to any questions, but it really seemed to me, rather than take you through the budget and all the issues, I really should say to you, this is a way for us to help a group of people who started out deciding to help themselves. And they have made a tremendous difference in the lives of the people that are members, that choose to drop in there, because it's a place for them to be engaged and active and productive and cared for and loved every day. So thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Very worthwhile cause. Martha, if you would put up the slide for the offering, please. The thank offering for today will be given to the 2 thank offering recipients that made presentations. Please make the checks out to PW in the SOC, and you can mail those checks to me, Susan Oakes, the treasurer, 2123 Hillside Drive, Norton Shores, Michigan, 49441. And if you don't have time to write it down as you are looking at the slide, I registered you all, so you have my email address, and it's s2123@aol.com. And let's support these 2 very worthwhile missions, the Castle in Centerville, Ohio, and the Sunday School Daycare Center in Belize. And thank you so much.
Martha, if you please put up the next slide. This prayer is an opportunity to bring forward the names of your grandmothers in faith, biblical women, women in your family tree, your Sunday school teachers, your preachers, women who faithfully encourage you to live with grace and love. If you choose, please light your candle now in the memory and in the gratitude for these women, or display a photo or a picture or an item that represents what these women have meant to you. The next slide, please. Let us pray. Let us give thanks for faithful grandmothers. God of promise, we thank you for Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, Bathsheba, and Mary.
We thank you for the unnamed women of faith who tirelessly loved those in their care, never looking for reward, often not even receiving thanks.
As we remember our own stories alongside the stories of Jesus's grandmothers, help us to be mindful of our place in the great story of your saving grace.
May we also faithfully nurture those who are under our care and those who come after us.
Help us to pay attention to the times when we exclude and to always look for you at work in the ignored and the cast aside.
Let us remember that our own experiences of being ignored and cast aside are also the places where you bring life and hope.
For the good of the world, and so all may be overwhelmed by the joy of your presence, we pray in the names of all of whom Jesus was born, Jesus the Messiah. Amen.
Amen.